So just to recap very quickly, this chapter 9 of the Tanya, especially as expounded upon by Rabbi Steinsaltz, really speaks not just of the two souls that the Tanya spoke about at the beginning, the animal soul versus the divine soul, or vice versa, the divine soul versus the animal soul, but it really now goes to speak about the actual tools of how to ensure that the divine soul prevails each and every time. For most of us, it's a constant struggle. There are only very few that are righteous, as the Tanya states also at the beginning, that don't need necessarily to have this struggle throughout their lives, because at some point they conquer the animal soul completely. Most of us, the animal soul is well and alive every single day of our lives. And therefore, the big question is, how can we really at least control it, at least subdue it each and every day of our lives when this struggle is constantly felt? So now chapter 9 really goes into some of the tools. And one of the dominant tools of this chapter is that as he calls it, Moach Shalit al Halev, the mind must control the heart. Emotions, the world of emotions is a wild world, and therefore it can bring confusion and also erratic behavior, while the world of the mind is a cold world. It's a world that's calculated and a world that can bring clarity and can bring direction and focus. And therefore, the first and foremost step in order to overcome this animal soul, the animalistic instincts that we may have, is to use our brains before we use our emotions, right? We spoke a lot about this and how the emotions have room, but they have to be controlled by the mind. Otherwise, they really can be very destructive. Now, you know what? Let's just continue on page 229, and then we'll see what Rabbi Steinsaltz has to say on this, which direction he takes this big thought. So again, 229, opening the Tanya, one of the classical works of Musar. Does anyone? Yeah, by the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz compares the works of Musar in this big commentary to the works of Hasidus. The works of Musar are also works that are that speak to the soul of the person, but they look at it from a different perspective. I would say that this comparison between the work of Musar and the work of Hasidut, and how they both look at the soul, can be best exclaimed by stating the verse, I think it's in chapter 36 in the book of Psalms, that says, Sur mera va'aseh tov, where King David says to us that one should refrain from bad and do good. Bakesh shalom ve'rodfeo is the rest of the verse. You should ask for peace and pursue it. So the books of Musa really focus on sur mera, refrain from bad. Hasidus, I think the work of Hasidus focus more on va'aseh tov, on do good. Two different perspectives on the struggles of the soul. One is more focusing on refraining from bad, maybe being more therefore strict towards a person so that bad does not interfere. The other one says, no, do good. If you enhance the light, then darkness will be expelled almost automatically. But that's really the general idea. Now, continuing to compare these two works, Rabbi Steinsaltz here continues to say, does anyone want to read one of the classical works of Musar? Anyone?
I'll read.
Go for it, I guess.
Okay. One of the classical works of Musar, written not long before Tanya, is Mezilat Yesharim by Rabbi Chaim Moses Luzzatto. The book, written in beautiful Hebrew, describes how someone can proceed from virtue to virtue, from diligence to alacrity, from alacrity to cleanliness, and so on, step by step, until he reaches the level of the divine spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. Somewhere between diligence and alacrity, an ordinary person might regress, leaving him completely confused as to what level, if any, he now holds, and feeling that what this book says is utterly impossible. In contrast, although the demands made by the Tanya may appear somewhat extreme, the book takes into account human nature as we know it, with all its complexities and problems. It explains to the person what is happening to him, how the inner upheavals one experiences are an integral part of oneself, of the basic duality of human nature. It explains that one must accept that this duality will exist within him from the day of his bar mitzvah to the day he dies. The duality can be moderated and can take on more refined forms. To some extent, a person can even exploit the conflict within him to his spiritual advantage, but he can never totally uproot it.
Right. I just want to expound on this because I think it's a very, very important point as to how we look at ourselves in the mirror. Because there is this approach that says, well, there's a clear roadmap and there are destinations on this roadmap. And once you reach destination 1, great, you get a little medal. And then you have to prepare for the next journey to reach destination 2. And then destination 3 and destination 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. And that's more or less what sometimes the works of Musar do, which there's nothing wrong with that. It might be doable for many people, but you have destinations. And until you reach those destinations, you really are not completing your service of God, your Avodat Hashem, what's called. The work of Hasidus would maybe disagree with that approach. Why? Because it realizes that being human beings, we have setbacks. And sometimes, even when we do reach a destination, and we're on our way now to destination number 2, I have setbacks with destination 1. So that destination 1 really wasn't fully achieved because we're still struggling with that, even though we may have checked that box. That's what he means here, Rabbi Steinsaltz, by speaking about the human complexities and problems, as he points out, that really having a route like that, having a roadmap like that, can really get to a person, because a person might fail again and again and again, even though he thinks he may have checked that box. And therefore, there is a different approach. There's a different approach. And that different approach is that you don't necessarily have a roadmap, but you have the ability to focus more not on the future, which is what a roadmap is, but on the present, a day at a time. And in that day, in that present, you focus on the small victories, not the big ones, the big destinations like we were speaking about, the small victories. Right now, overcame my evil inclination. I exercised impulse control. That's a victory. And I might slip the next moment. But then the moment after that, I again exercise self-control or whatever it may be, or I didn't do this, I didn't say that word, or I didn't do that act. Those small victories is really what a person must strive to amass in life. It's not a question of roadmaps. It's not even a question of looking to the future, as mentioned. It's a question really of living the present, of amassing the small victories of the present. Eventually, after a year, maybe on Rosh Hashanah, or maybe on your birthday, or after maybe 5 years, you look back and you say, oh, okay, these small victories did move me forward. But it wasn't the goal to begin with. The goal to begin with was to make the best out of the present. So it's not a roadmap. It's really it's not a map, and it's not a road. It's a focus on the now. It's a focus on the current small victories that I can achieve right at this second. And this is rooted, just to elaborate on this a little more, but this is rooted in the understanding, as Rabbi Steinsaltz says, that in every single one of us, there's a duality. And because of that duality, I won't ever be able to really completely achieve a destination without that animal soul constantly getting at me. And therefore, the only way to do it's like you're in a boxing ring all the time. You have two opposite powers all the time. You know, in boxing matches, I don't know if anyone here is into the MMA or the UFC or boxing matches, but just for the sake of the example, in boxing matches, I don't think it exists that an opponent is destroyed one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a, like that there are destinations. In other words, that at first he begins, let's put it this way, that your opponent begins upright and all strong, and then slowly but surely he goes down to the floor. He usually goes down to the floor in one shot, but that one shot was created with tiny bits of small victories, if you see what I'm saying. Same with the animal soul. The animal soul doesn't, you know, it's not like you have a destination, so now he's shorter and now he's less dangerous. No, he'll rise up again. But it's the small victories of the moment. Small victories of the moment eventually can enable us to prevail. Now, the problem with this example is that in the boxing match, eventually there's a clear victor in most cases. And our day-to-day lives, no, the animal soul is well and alive until, as he says here, until the day we die. And therefore, these small victories are even more important because there's really no complete subduing of the animal soul at any step. There's no complete victory in this case. Anyway, that's just for the sake of the example. What I'm trying to say is that we have to live in the present more than we have to live in the future. Living in the present means celebrating the small victories of the present, recognizing that there's a duality in you. And if I'm able right now to conquer my animal soul, then that should be celebrated. And I don't have to wait for a destination sometime in the near future when that destination might not be achieved, or if it is achieved, it might not be fully accomplished because I might fall back because of that human condition that we're all experiencing. So that's the big idea, yeah. Comparing the works of the Musar and the works of Hasidus. If I may, maybe to best highlight this, and again, I don't want to be the only one monologuing, and I want everyone here to speak, including William here, who joined me in my presence. It's good to have you here too, William. But just to highlight this with a Hasidic anecdote, but I think it was Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev, who always found positive things to say about people, even those people who, were obviously mistaken or obviously dealing with their own personal struggles. And one day, a student came to Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev, and he said to Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev, "You should know that your other student, who's now 75 years old, who was so pious and such a good student all these years, this 75-year-old now became a heretic. He left Judaism. What do you have to say about this, Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev? The facts are clear. You can't make up some story as you sometimes do. I know you're the advocate of everybody, but the guy left everything." Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev said, "Look how special this person is. Look how precious this person is. Because it took 75 years for the evil inclination to finally get the better of it. Look how strong he must be. 75 years he was able to withhold him, to control him. And after 75 years, he succumbed. But for 75 years, he was as strong as a lion. So look how special this person is." But I'm just saying that I'm thinking of this story because what Rabbi Levi Tzchak of Berditchev was really saying is that approach of Hasidus, that it's the strength that you can demonstrate day in and day out that really is really what needs to be celebrated, not the destinations, not the achievements, but really the constant strength and courage to overcome your evil inclination right now at this point. So that's what Rabbi Steins is saying here. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your disagreements, including from you, William, if you want. Just make sure you're not on mute. Fine. Otherwise, we can continue, but I'd love to hear from you. Fine. Let's continue a little, Margot.
Okay.
Middle of the page here, 229.
Similarly, the Mishnah says, "We have neither the tranquility of the wicked nor the suffering of the righteous." Apart from the very few individuals who happen to be either complete tzaddikim, righteous persons, or complete rishayim, wicked persons, a person can be sure of one thing: his soul will not give him rest. Peace and tranquility might perhaps come after death, and even then we are told the righteous have no rest in the world to come, whereas the wicked are beaten in the grave and flung around in the hollow of a sling. In this world, as long as a person lives, he cannot experience tranquility. At times, one may earn a respite, a temporary ceasefire, but achieving complete and true inner peace is never possible. There is a permanent struggle within, and a person should understand that his is an existence of conflict, and that the hope of attaining peace and tranquility is not realistic. With this knowledge, one is not disappointed about failing to attain peace, nor does one feel that one's life has been wasted if one does not achieve a decisive victory in the battle of life. A person must realize that everything he does involves a struggle, that life is war in which nation over nation shall strengthen itself. The pendulum swings from side to side, and the task of man is to make every effort to emerge from the struggle in a better state than he entered it. In the course of this struggle, in between battles, he should make sure to move forward. Ultimately, this is all a human being can achieve.
Right.
Hmm.
Which is, it can be a little bit depressing, but I think it's also very encouraging because, the Tanya gives us a reality check. To achieve complete victory, to follow a roadmap in which we come out like marathon runners as the winners, as okay, the race is now behind us, is impossible for most people. There are righteous human beings, very few of them in every generation, that might have achieved that. But for most of us, the struggle is a very living struggle each and every day. And that struggle continues on. And for the righteous, as he says here, it continues on even in the world to come, where they have to continue to struggle. In the words of Rashi points this out actually in a few portions from now. This week's portion is Vayishlach. This week's portion is Vayetze, then Vayishlach, and then Vayeshev. So in 2 weeks from now, Jacob is now an old man, and he comes to Beersheba, and he wants to settle. He finally wants to rest. And Rashi points out that Jacob wanted to finally dwell in serenity, with peace of mind, after the horrendous life he had, being haunted and persecuted by his brother, then living in the house of his father-in-law where he was mistreated, and that's to say the least. And then he had inner fightings in the family, and he had a terrible life. And then his sons, Shimon and Levi, come and kill, murder all the men of Shechem. Just imagine the life this man has. Finally, he settles in Beersheba. Bikesh Yaakov l'shev Shava. He deserves a little peace of mind. And then immediately, kafatz alav rogzo shel Yosef, as Rashi points out, that Joseph's saga started. That's when his brothers threw him into a pit. His children are not getting along. And God was trying to make a point to Jacob in a very maybe cruel way, that tzaddikim en lahem menucha lo ba'olam hazeh v'lo ba'olam haba, as Rashi points out, that the righteous have no rest, not in this world and not in the world to come. Now, you may ask, well, that's not fair. As mentioned, it might be a little bit depressing. Why? Why can't we have some peace of mind, some rest? So you have the old grandmother saying that rest is only in the grave. That's when you rest. Now, by the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz would say something quite sharp about this. He wouldn't sleep, but he would say it goes further. It's not just that rest and sleep is only in the grave, but God allocates time for everything in this world. He allocates time for eating. He also allocates time for sleeping. Most of that time is in the grave. That's the time he allocated for you to sleep. So if you sleep in this world, then you've taken from that time that was allocated for sleep in the grave. So he asked, if you sleep in this world, what are you going to do in the grave? What's going to happen? You took all that time already. But anyway,
just a quick comment about that rest in the grave. My and grandmother's sayings and such. My grandmother would say, when we would, present various challenges we were going through or difficulties, she would always say, Jordan, don't forget, the first 100 years are the hardest.
That's very good. That's very good. Very good. But so that's to use their grandmother's expression, but to use Job's expression in the book of Job that says, Adam la'amal yulad, that a person was born to toil, to labor, to work. And the reason for that, again, is because God is actually doing us a favor by sending us to this world to toil. In heaven, yes, we can rest. In heaven, there's the idea of Gan Eden, of paradise, is basking in the light of God and enjoying the delights of the divine. But in this world, God sends our soul on a mission so that it can elevate itself, so that it can achieve that which it cannot achieve in the world to come. But how can it achieve that? Through work, through the struggles that we face day in and day out. And through these struggles, we are elevating ourselves and we are elevating the world. Now, this comes again with a lot of work. Afterwards, after 120, like you said, Jordan, after 100 years, or maybe 120, then maybe we can start thinking of rest. I remember thinking of the last conversation I had with Rabbi Steinsaltz before his stroke. 2 weeks before his stroke. I remember being in his office in Jerusalem, and at some point in the conversation, Rabbi Stein was then 82 years old. And he tells me, I have plans here in my office for the next 150 years.
Wow.
I don't show them to anybody because people will think that I'm crazy. I have plans for the next 150 years, which inspired me deeply because it taught me this lesson that we come to this world to toil. If we had come to this world just to sit on the couch and eat some good ice cream, then we should have stayed in heaven. But in this world, we're on a mission, and that mission comes with work. And one cannot rest on his laurels, so to speak, because there's a mission to be fulfilled. God entrusts us with that mission each and every morning when he wakes us up. And we say, Modani, thank you, God, for restoring our soul in us. You have faith in us, we say to God. Faith in us, but that means faith in our mission. So if we stay in bed and ignore that mission all day long, then we've really betrayed our very raison d'etre, as they say in French. And that's really the deeper reason of why there's no peace of mind or as he calls it here, tranquility in this world. That one must work day in and day out. And that work comes with a lot of struggle, especially that the evil inclination does not want for us to fulfill that mission. That's why it is created too, so that it causes some troubles along the way, so that we don't fulfill our mission. And we'll have to come back and be reincarnated again, as Judaism believes. By the way, the Tanya points out, and again, I want to hear from you, but the Tanya points out that the evil inclination, we should be cognizant of that as we struggle each and every day, whether it's with the evil inclination or the obstacles that the evil inclination sends our way. But even the evil inclination really deeply inside wants us to prevail over it. Why? How is that? So Tanya much later on uses the example, comes from the Zohar, but uses the example of a king who wanted to test his son, his son, the prince, who was going to eventually become the successor to the king, right? Take his father's place. But he wanted to see if he would be a good king, or if he just came to it because he was born a prince. You need to prove yourself as a king. So the king sent his son a very difficult test. What was the test? He sent his son a prostitute to see if he would be seduced or not. Now, from the prostitute's standpoint, think about this. She's in a lose-lose situation, because if she does her job very well and she does seduce the prince, the king's going to be upset. If she doesn't do a job so well, the king is also going to be upset, because he's going to say to her, you didn't do your job. My son was able to control himself. So she's in a catch-22 situation. Same here with the evil inclination. God created the evil inclination to prove that we can indeed become royal, that we can indeed fulfill our mission. But the evil inclination is a catch-22, it's lose-lose for it, for the right. If it does its job too well, God is going to be upset because we failed. If it doesn't do your job too well, then God's going to say to the evil inclination, you didn't do your job well. You failed your mission. So deep inside, the evil inclination is already has already lost. So we don't have to worry about that too much. All we have to do is do our job by working hard and fulfilling our mission and celebrating the present and the small victories of the present.
I was going to say it's interesting in terms of evil inclination, because I was reading, I have a copy of the Echayenu booklet, and it was talking about Esav and the fact that, originally it was considered that, Esav would be the better one to take over. And in terms of his having an evil inclination and everything, but that he was able to hunt and everything else. But I guess in terms of certain people, the evil inclination kind of takes over or is more their side. Right.
It's interesting because Yitzchak loved Esav. So very clearly, Kitzayit Befiv, because he was a hunter. Now, what this is saying is exactly what you're saying, that Yitzchak saw the incredible power that Esav had. Unfortunately, it was channeled in the wrong direction, but he wanted to harness that power for the good. If Esav indeed had harnessed that power for the good, he would have been on a much higher level than Jacob. And Yitzchak believed in Esav until his death. Really, he wanted to give Esav the whole because he saw that power. Indeed, that's why the struggle of evil does not make you evil. Quite the opposite, it can make you good if you know how to channel that power, because it means that there's something there, that there's tremendous potential there, right? So well said. That's correct. Yeah, very good. And that's really what the Tanya is saying. William, please. Yeah.
As far as the mission is concerned,
Yeah,
you're not obligated to complete it, but you're obligated to start.
very good. That's right. Good point, which is like the words of the ethics of our fathers. That's that it's not up to you to finish the work, and but you have no right to free yourself from it. That's right. Yeah, very well said. By the way, the flip side of what you were saying, Benjamin, too, is that it shows us how we can never give up on anyone, even the people that look like Esavs out there. We can't give up on them because really they have tremendous potential that is unfortunately channeled in such terrible ways. But if we knew, like Yitzchak, to harness that potential, then we can really, then they can achieve greatness. This is also why I just read that yesterday, but it's fascinating. It's a lesson in education because at one point, Yaakov takes Esav's blessing, right? Remember that? And then Esav decides, I'm going to kill my brother Yaakov because he stole my blessing. So what does Rivka do? Rivka tells Yaakov, run away. Go to my brother's house. There you'll find safety. Which is something obviously that Yitzchak agreed to because otherwise there would have been a disagreement. Now, I just read this yesterday by the Slonim Rebbe, who says that it's interesting because what Rivka and Yitzchak could have done as parents is maybe stop or kick Esav out. How dare you want to kill your brother? Kick him out. Let Jacob stay in your home. There you can protect him better. Why give the duty of protection to someone else, even if it's your brother, especially your corrupt brother? We all know who's Rivka's brother is. Why not keep Yaakov in the house and kick Esav away? And that's because Yitzchak and Rivka understood that they have to love Esav to the best of their ability because there's so much potential there. So they have to keep him in the house. Jacob is already a goody-goody. Let him stay out of the house. But those types of children, you have to keep in the house and give them all the love and all support you have towards them. Because if you can harness their potential, then just greatness can be achieved. That's why they kept Dafka Esav in the house and not Jacob. Quite amazing. I'm saying, it's a great lesson in education, but it goes back to this idea that we're speaking about, that unfortunately, there's no smooth sailing life, especially the Esavs out there have a very tough time. But if we can harness that power and tap into that infinite potential, then no doubt greatness is achieved. Much more than the greatness that even Jacobs can achieve.